A trade war is when countries start fighting over money, products, and rules. It's like an international food fight, except instead of food, people throw around big words like tariffs, sanctions, and embargoes. And recently, I've been hearing these words a lot and realized I didn't fully know what they mean. So let's break them down together. Tariffs. A tariff is just a tax on stuff coming in from another country. It makes things coming from overseas more expensive so that you buy local stuff instead. Sanctions. These are like economic punishments. Sanctions are when the world goes, hey, we're a bit disappointed, and block a country from doing certain business deals, but not all of them. Embargoes. Instead of just blocking some deals, an embargo says, we're done. No trade, no products, no business, we're out. That's how a trade war starts. One country slaps a tariff and the other country fires back, maybe even harder. So with that crucial vocab covered, let's dive into some of the craziest trade wars in history. The Chicken War. In the early 1960s, American chicken farmers went absolutely bonkers. They industrialized chicken production to the point where they could ship frozen birds over to Europe cheaper than European farmers could raise a bird and sell it locally. This created a massive wave of American chicken hitting the markets in France and West Germany. And European farmers, they were fuming because they were getting absolutely shafted. So in 1962, the European Economic Community slapped tariffs on US chicken, essentially saying, keep your Yankee chicken dookie to yourselves. Now the US could have hit back with tariffs on cheese or wine or, I don't know, snails. But instead, they hit back where it really hurts. Trucks. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson put up a 25% tariff on imported light trucks, specifically targeting things like the Volkswagen Type 2, Germany's beloved van. The reason? West Germany was one of the main drivers behind the chicken tariffs, and taxing their trucks and vans was the economic equivalent of hitting Germany with scooter ankle. And it worked. German vans disappeared from American lots. US truck makers like Ford and General Motors basically locked down the US market. Imports never recovered in that area. The most ridiculous part? That 25% truck tariff is still in effect today. It's one of the reasons foreign car companies have had to jump through hoops just to sell pickups in the US. So yeah, the next time you see an F-150, it might have looked a bit different if Europe hadn't started beefing over chickens. Napoleon's Continental system. For this story, we need a little intro to Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon wasn't just some French dude in a funny hat. He was a military genius, political mastermind, and self-declared emperor of the French. But he was also a control freak who didn't get along with Britain. And when he couldn't break Britain with his military, he tried to break their economy. In 1806, he brought in the Continental system, a massive embargo that banned any European nation allied with or under French control from trading with Britain. This was supposed to be economic warfare. If no one in Europe bought British goods, the thinking was that Britain would collapse. Except Britain didn't collapse, because they had their Royal Navy, and colonies, and a global trade network Napoleon couldn't touch. They just started trading through other countries, sold to the Americas, and kept business booming. Meanwhile, Napoleon's embargo was backfiring. Prices in Europe went up considerably. Merchants started smuggling British goods through the cracks. Even Napoleon's allies were secretly ignoring the embargo because, surprise, people like money. But the final straw came when Russia bailed. Tsar Alexander I was like, this isn't working, and started trading with Britain again. And Napoleon? He lost it. In 1812, he gathered one of the largest armies Europe had ever seen, over 600,000 men, and marched into Russia to teach them a lesson. It didn't go well. By the time winter came along, Napoleon's army was freezing, starving, and doing the opposite of surviving. They retreated in chaos. Fewer than 100,000 soldiers made it back. And Britain? Still trading, still strong, still sipping tea and minding its own business. The Continental system was supposed to isolate Britain. Instead, it isolated Napoleon from his allies and eventually from power. It was a trade war that triggered an actual war that pretty much ruined his empire. The US Japan Oil Embargo. In the late 1930s, Japan was on an expansion spree. They invaded China, they took over French Indochina, and were eyeing the Dutch East Indies for their oil fields. The United States didn't like this new empire-building thing, and in July 1941, they responded the only way they could without firing a shot. They cut off Japan's oil. Japan depended on the US for almost 90% of the oil it used. Without it, their military machine would grind to a halt. Planes wouldn't fly, ships wouldn't sail, so Japan had to make a decision. 1. Back down and become politically humiliated, or 2. Double down and take the oil by force. They chose number 2. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, crippling the US Pacific Fleet. At the same time, they began moving south to seize the oil in the Dutch East Indies. The goal wasn't to destroy America, it was to buy time. Time to grab the oil they needed. Time to delay US retaliation until they could fortify their new territories. But the US didn't just retaliate, they declared war, and so did half the planet. The oil embargo wasn't just a pressure tactic. Japan viewed it as economic warfare. The US saw it as a reasonable response to imperial aggression. The result? World War II became, well, as big as it did. Now that's all I've got time for today. Like this video if you learned something, subscribe if you want more, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!